What's going on all? Hadex Gaming here, and today I want to do some building. Maybe do a little bit of combat, but who knows. This is currently my island. Last episode I said it looked nice, but it was a shame that it was on such a large island. So, to counteract that, I plan on utilizing the full island. Rather than build one base on each biome, I'm going to build one biome on this island. After all, it is a forever home. So I've got some plans. I won't spoil them all, but you can see I've scribbled on a screenshot that I've got. I've photoshopped some bits here and there and drafted some ideas. And by drafted, I mean I wrote dot points and sections that may have some builds on them. So I knew my builds would require some wood, and currently my little seasonal diverse forestry zone that I had wouldn't be enough. Plus I wanted to create a huge forest. So I took to creating and planting saplings in a huge area on the left of the island. And one, this acts as a forest that looks nice and dense, but two, it will also provide a larger forestry zone. The goal was to have my settlers work their butts off and earn their keep, but I'd also probably like to hire a few more settlers to help with the increase of the workload. After planting them all over the place, I did have to go through and do a little cleanup so that we wouldn't have isolated and bunched saplings not growing. And just before I start my next project, I want to see what variation of fences I was dealing with, and if I mix them, would they still connect? Turns out they don't connect, so it's probably best just to stick with one type of fencing. I also apologize if this episode is all over the place. I get sidetracked very easy, and one moment I may be building a forest, and the next I'll be thinking about building some more housing or placing down some more apiaries, but I'll try to do my best to keep the video organized, or at least semi-organized. So with that said, and my fences decided, I start working on my project for this corner of the map. I wanted to build a graveyard. Now I didn't want just rows and rows of tombstones, but I'm not the most creative person, so let's see what I end up cooking up. You'll also see some other flooring types in my pack, and that's because I also tested out what floors would be best. Also how nice it would have been if spider flooring was possible to obtain, as it would be all misty and stuff, but for now it's not possible. I added a few final touches, some pathways, a backpack, a fallen altar, and decided that was the graveyard now done. As you're probably aware, and I've mentioned many times, I am not a creative person, so to me, this is a pretty epic build. Onto my next little mini project was more farmland. Now I completed my goal of having one of every crop growing, but the purpose of this extra farmland was to build a bulk amount of wheat. Wheat is always a consistent money maker. You can sell them to farmers for tons of gold, or you can just sell them in general. The more farms I have, then the more wheat I can sell. I decided that this was going to be my biggest passive money maker. And yeah, I could have had lemon trees and made lemonade to sell for tons of money, but I'd rather use the lemons to make better food for myself. Speaking of lemons, I got distracted and decided to plant more fruit trees. I also then realized that if I wanted more, I'd have to buy more, and to do that, I'd need more money. As you can see, my traders are already raking in the money without even a need for a wheat farm, but it can never hurt to have too much. So I went to the farmer and decided to do what I did with the regular trees and buy lots of each, so I'd always have a steady supply of each type of fruit. After planting them down, I realized I'd need to wait to get more wood for my farmland, so I decided to continue further south and turn the bottom of my island into an even bigger swamp area. I had the sub-island already, but I wanted to make it feel more swampy. So I started mapping out and pathing where I want my swamp to extend to. And so as I was placing down my swamp tiles, it was starting to become dark, but I wanted to smash out a decent amount of it before calling it a night and waiting until morning. The next night though, I got hit with a raid of pirates. Now this isn't usually an issue, but at some point I deposited my summoning weapon and one of my settlers had stolen it for themselves. I had to call them over and yoink it back before trying to tackle what could possibly be a tier 5 raid. I headed on over and tried my magic missiles on them, and whilst it was dealing crazy damage, my magic or mana was being chewed through. And I resorted back to my trusty summon build. As always, I grabbed the loot, keep the tier 5 items, and salvage anything else. Now onto a new task. I wanted to split some of the island with a river or a water channel. and I did so with the help of my trusty infinite water bucket. It wasn't an issue making the river, the issue lies with making it blend nicely with some sand. So I've roughly cut out what I want, and what this will do is split my island into 3 more sections. My main section, and my little island at the bottom here, and then I also have the little bit on the right. And what I mentioned right back at the beginning is I want one of each biome, and this small subsection will now be dedicated to the desert. With the sections finished, it was time to grab some sand and start making it look like it belonged. As I said earlier, I am very easily distracted and figured why not plant some seeds in my farms for wheat and cave glow, so that whilst I'm doing other things, it can be growing and be harvested in the process. That way they don't just sit there empty. Once I finished that, I actually got to filling in the river with some sand, and holy heck. Don't take this the wrong way, but I love the new textures, but the fact it all blends together means I don't know where I'm placing these floors. I also got to completing about 80% of the river before I decided to change it up and start filling in this small island to have it act as a desert. It took some time, but I got it done. I don't quite have any plans for this as of yet, but maybe a bridge to connect them and maybe some oasis-like areas. I'm not 100% sure, so leave them in the comments below, and then that way I can work on that later. With the island complete, I then finished placing my apiaries down and needed a few more queen bees to pop into them all. This was a problem for another time, and I also found a bark blade in my storage. I took it out and decided to give it a swing. A multi-hitting, projectile shooting, hybrid sword greatsword. That sounds amazing. I then took off to the autumn plains to find beehives. I reckon I ended up scouting all the queen bees I needed over about 6 or 7 biomes, and collected all of the raspberry bushes along the way too. I wanted a bunch of them just for steady food. I headed back and started placing in all the queen bees, and as I was doing so, I thought maybe I don't need the apiary frames as they cost 5 logs and 5 wool, and 1 frame will be used for every 2 honey harvested. Not only is that precious resources, but that is a task the settlers cannot perform and they cannot automate, which means I have to maintain the upkeep on them. Then on the way out, I saw a hive spawn. It had a few little bees and 1 queen, almost as if they popped out of the carrots. It was a feature in Necesse I didn't even know existed. After finishing the apiaries, I got started on a castle or city walls kind of build. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be a castle or a city, but I knew I wanted some kind of perimeter wall style structure around the island. And so I started with the bridge and then trying to map out the main gates and some walls to seal it in. Part of creating the river earlier was to have this complete with a moat so that the only entrance was the bridge. Once I got the main gates done, I decided to do some corner structures to square it out, and had actually started with a circular design, but I couldn't figure out circles with squares to save my life, so I went with a square build again. Halfway through the build, I ran out of stone and headed down to the caves. With my mining build on and a superior miner's potion, I was melting through stone and tearing it down in single hits. In just 5 minutes time, I had cleaned out a massive chunk of the caves and ended up with tons and tons of stone, some ores, some loot. Overall, not bad and should keep me set on stone for quite a while. With all that stone though, I ended up finishing off nearly all of the perimeter and then got attacked by the literal mafia. This was a raid I didn't know existed, but must have came out in the previous update. And then for whatever reason, my crystal dragons annihilated them and absolutely chewed through them, one-shotting every single one of them. But then I found out they were just a basic raid, not tier 1, not tier 2 or 5 or whatever. They were just basic. So aside from the cosmetic outfits, I got no good loot from that. I went back and finished the walls and started to place some floors down throughout the entire area. What is probably 15 to 20 seconds for you guys felt like an ever-living eternity for me, and I didn't even do it all. As you can see, I missed some tiles to give it an overgrown look. As I mentioned previously, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a castle or just like a city perimeter style area. I also mentioned I needed it to be an island, so I finished off the separation so that now the only entrance was the bridge I made earlier. And I forgot to record a bit off camera, but all I did was use about 50 tile bombs on a snow island to scoop up as much snow as possible and fill in the island full of snow. This island was going to be my snow biome. Filling in this island was 10 times worse than filling in the perimeter with stone. Stone is so much easier to gather and a lot more satisfying. As you can see, it looks like a war has been waged against the snow biome, and I still didn't even have enough snow. What's worse is that you can't even craft snow. What I would absolutely love to see is a recipe to turn the 5 million stacks of snowballs I got into just snow. It's snow regardless of the shape, so it'd be really cool to use that in a way that made sense. But concerns aside, I finished up covering the entire island in snow and then moved on to the next project I had, except I got distracted again and finished my crop farm. I then decided to create a wall of trees between the swamp and the rest of the island, and whilst doing so was rudely ambushed by a pack of rogue hunters. They didn't pose a threat at all, and after inspecting their loot it made sense. They were on strike and just another basic tier raid. So back to my new project was an indoor barn for some more sheep and cows, and then a ton of housing so I can hire more settlers to help with the massive influx of berry bushes, trees, farmland, and then soon to be cattle when I sort this barn out. I would need more farmers, more animal keepers, and just more settlers in general. And on top of all that, it means my cell chests are going to fill faster, so I would need to hire more traders as well. This is a lot of new settlers, so more housing is definitely necessary. So my barn is roughly done, minus the fences, but I still have a ton of walls and floors on me, and continue to start some housing. Now my house designs are usually squares, so from time to time I like to cut corners. Anyways, I finished the shell of 6 new houses, so that's at least 6 more NPCs, and then got to work on another bunch of houses, and of course spiced up my designs whilst keeping the builds relatively minimal to fit the style of the rest of the housing, whilst deviating away just enough to allow it to look different but kind of samey. Before decorating my houses, my ideas got the better of me, and I started a project I wasn't quite 100% sure of, but I find if I start it, then I have to finish it later, and that's a great way to prolong the fun of this homeworld. This build will be completed in another episode though, and most likely next episode. Alright, so I stock up on decorations and start decorating my rooms. Room 1 completed, room 2 completed, room 3 and 4 completed, room 5 completed, room 6 completed, room 7 completed, room 8 completed, room 9 completed, and finally room 10 completed. My housing isn't the most unique, with kitchens and rooms and whatnot, but the goal is happiness. And why would they even need a kitchen if they can just pick fresh food for themselves and eat it? So now I have finalized my swamp. I went through and filled it out a bit more and placed some willow trees, and right now I'm just creating a line of willow trees to kind of blend and separate the swamp from the forest. So what you're watching now is quite possibly the worst luck you could ever see. Right now I'm just looking for one extra animal keeper, but decided to hire a few extra NPCs along the way. Island number 1, trader number 1, trader number 2, farmer number 1, farmer number 2 with 0 animal keepers. Island number 2, 0 animal keepers. Island number 3, 0 animal keepers. Island number 4, 0 animal keepers. Island number 5, still no animal keepers. Island number 6, still no animal keepers. And finally, island number 7, I find 1 and made sure to hire them right away. After hiring the first one, I then spotted a second animal keeper here too, and this one even gave me a cute little Pokemon reference about catching them all. So I hired that one, and then further up the path a little bit too, there was a third. I hired that one as well, but I went 6 islands without finding any, just to find 1 island with 3. How insane is that? I then went back to base and assigned their work priorities. Maximum husbandry, a little bit of hauling, a dash of farming, and not much of the rest. I had gone and hired 9 settlers in total, 3 animal keepers, 3 traders, 2 farmers, and 1 miner. The extra trader and miner were off camera as I forgot to start the recording, but I hired them anyway. With all my hiring out of the way, I still had room for 1 more settler eventually, but I got to working on my barn again. I wanted cows in the top, sheep on the left, and chickens on the right. However, I ended up settling for cows, sheep, and pigs, but I may still swap the pigs out for chickens, that way nothing needs to be slaughtered. Milk from cows, wool from sheep, eggs from chickens, they could all stay alive. I'd also never messed with carpets before and got to crafting a variety of them to use around my settlement and kinda just see how they looked. And whilst I won't make you sit through all of it, I apologize if I've ruined the aesthetics of some of these rooms. I should definitely not have been given access to this much decorating and should never consider interior design to be a career path of mine. I also went round and added some windows to the rooms too, and to be honest, I don't even know if it affects the happiness, but I've never used them in a build before and thought that a town looks more populated and more lively the more dense and messy it is. So surely the windows couldn't hurt, right? I also witnessed what may be the funniest series of events I have seen in Necesse. I get notified that a pack of lost mummies are approaching, and as I go to wait for them, Bobby the miner comes flying past in a boat as if he has just stolen and plundered some long lost treasure and was now being chased by mummies who have reanimated back to life. I don't know if it was an intentional thing that the game has done or if it's actually lore into the game, but it was hilarious to see. These mummies weren't fooling around either. I got hit by 1 arrow and it was enough for me to use my lifeline. After defeating them though, I got some really good tier 5 loot. A mixed bag of goodies, some quartz weapons, emerald weapons, all at tier 4 and 5. And as always, I broke down what I didn't need and upgraded my bark blade to tier 5. I also fumbled my recording again as it was about midnight for me and my kid woke up, so I wasn't thinking too much about unpausing my recording, but I created some housing in the snow area walls and a small kind of smuggler's exit or entrance at the back. So this is the housing I built, and I plan to fill it with much more so I can hire a ton more people. I also plan to decorate it differently to the village style housing out of the walls. Alright, so just to wrap it up, this episode we did quite a bit. Finished and expanded the swamp and the desert, made a bunch of houses and farmland, hired a ton of settlers, created an entire city perimeter and carved out an island, and I still have quite a lot left of this to decorate too. This area I plan to make autumn plain style, and then I'm not sure what to put here, maybe a flower garden of some sort. And then I also did create the cemetery, which felt like an eternity ago after getting all that snow and stone and everything. And then at the top, I have 3 more projects I want to complete. And to top it all off, we've ended up with 30 settlers. We went from it looking like this to this. This video was about 8 hours worth of recording and has been one of my biggest project undertakings yet. So give it a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, have yourselves a happy time zone. So that means good morning, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you may be, and I hope to see you next time.